Hey guys, before we get started with today's show, I have some exciting news to share. Your Financial Pharmacist is now offering fee-only comprehensive financial planning services led by certified financial planner Tim Baker. We're dedicated to serving pharmacists like you who want something better than the status quo. We offer our clients an honest, education-focused approach that is specifically catered toward handling the high-income, student loan-laden, demanding career track of you, the pharmacists we serve. Our goal is simple: to get you from thinking, I don't know exactly what to do with my money, but I know I need to do something, to confidently saying, I know exactly what I need to do month in and month out to get out of debt, save for retirement, and achieve my financial goals. You can learn more by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com.
You need to keep emotion out of it, that this is an investment. This is not your forever home. And so once you've done all that math, like David said, don't ruin it by ignoring the math and making a bad decision. So keep the emotion out of it, walk into that deal with here's where we're going to go from a number standpoint, and we're not going to vary from that.
You're listening to the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast, a show all about inspiring you, the pharmacy professional, on your path towards achieving financial freedom. Hi, I'm Tim Ulbrich, and this week I welcome onto the show Nate Hedrick and David Bright, co-hosts of our brand new YFP Real Estate Investing podcast that is launching on this channel on Saturday, April 17th. We talk about the mission and why for the show, who the podcast is and is not for, the type of content we will cover, and the type of guests that will be featured throughout the show. We also discuss our newest guide developed by Nate and David, the Pharmacist Guide to Real Estate Investing, that details a step-by-step plan on how to get started in real estate investing. You can download a copy of the guide by visiting yfprealestate.com or by texting REI Guide, that's all one word, REI Guide, to 44222. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. And today's show is a special one, not just because it's episode 199, hard to believe that we're almost to episode 200, but special because we have something exciting to announce that we've mentioned on the podcast and in the YFP Facebook group over the last couple of weeks, and something that really has been in the works for much longer than that. On Saturday, this Saturday, April 17th, we're launching a brand new podcast through the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast channel called the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. Now, as much as I love the new podcast and the focus on real estate investing, I'm excited that the hosts of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast are two pharmacists, real estate investors, and friends that I've known for a while. Two guys that I have a great amount of respect for in the work that they do as pharmacists, in the integrity in which they approach their business and their investing, and the heart that they have for educating others, and who have both been on the show before, and that is Nate Hedrick, the Real Estate RPH, and David Bright. Nate and David, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
So I know you both have been on the show before. Nate, you've joined us many times on the YFP podcast. And David, we had you on not too long ago, episode 167, where we talked about must-know real estate terminology. But I don't want to assume that our audience knows your background and really important information that they get to know you as we get ready to launch the Real Estate Investing podcast, of which you two will be serving as the co-host. So David, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your career, how you got started in real estate investing, and your why behind pursuing real estate investing while keeping your pharmacy career.
Absolutely. Yeah, I started in pharmacy at 16, working in the drugstore, and went from there where pharmacy school, community pharmacy residency, and really just loved that outpatient community pharmacy drugstore opportunity that was there. A lot of the implementing and improving of non-dispensing clinical services really got me excited about that outpatient space, and then later as well with academia. That implementing and improving also mirrors hobby of real estate, the building and fixing of real estate. And so that was something that my wife and I had enjoyed too. We bought our first house as a short sale. It needed a lot of work. And so that kind of live-in flip was a way that we could diversify our financial plan, also just create some extra money for those memory-making experiences with the family. And so we've just enjoyed kind of doing that over time. At some point, we decided we didn't enjoy living in a construction zone anymore. So we started enjoying doing that in other properties. But that's just been a fun hobby along the way and part of our why behind real estate.
Great stuff, David. And I know you and I have had this conversation before, but we've known each other dating back to community pharmacy residency all the way back in 2008, 2009. And I like the connection you've made before about really some of the challenges around developing, implementing, evaluating patient care services in the community pharmacy setting, and really the connection between some of the interests and passions that you have in real estate as well. So excited to have your experience, your perspective on the show, really to be sharing that information with the community. But also what I have always taken away is really your passion to help other pharmacists and really lead with education, really teach some of these principles and help folks understand how they might be able to apply that to their own personal situation. So Nate, as I alluded to, we've had you on the show many times. I think now officially the most frequent guest on the YFP podcast. So starting way back on episode 40 and 41, where we had a 2-part series talking about 10 things every pharmacist should know about home buying. And then most recently on episode 193, building versus buying a home, what to consider. And that was in early March of 2021. And I think many of our listeners know you as the real estate RPH. So for those that haven't caught one of your several, I think at least 5 or 6 at this point, episodes on the YFP podcast, Nate, tell us about your background, pharmacy career, and how you ultimately ended up as a realtor and real estate investor.
Yeah, and I expect the trophy for most frequent guests to be arriving.
It's on the way. It's on the way, Nate.
So I started off full clinical track. I did a residency right after graduating from Ohio Northern back in 2013, and really fell in love with the pain and palliative care space. And was a hospice consultant for a long time, and really just I loved that role. And then as time went on, I kind of moved into more of a salesy type track where I was working with outside clients and really kind of touting what the other pharmacists were doing rather than doing that work myself. And as all that was happening, I was getting this interest in real estate and real estate investing. I think that the story I tell all the time is I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and my mindset just completely shifted. So when I should have been going out and getting my BCPS or some sort of additional certification in pharmacy, I told my wife I was going to get my real estate license. And she looked at me like I was crazy at first, but we've really fell in love with where that's taken our career and the opportunities that I have. And so back in 2017, I took that same idea and launched Real Estate RPH, a website all about educating pharmacists about home buying and home selling and real estate investing, and really just have been growing that ever since. And so really excited that we are able to launch this podcast today. I feel like it's the culmination of a lot of that stuff coming together. Mm-hmm. That idea of education and connection really in the purest form. So I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, and this really has been in the works for, I would say, a couple years. Yeah. I mean, it started with the idea of, hey, we were seeing a growing interest of real estate investing, wanting to learn more among the community. How can we help provide some education, some awareness? How can we connect pharmacists with other pharmacists? And all of that really led to, hey, let's start with the podcast. Let's start with the education. I think something we're all passionate about. And then let's see where it goes from there into the future. So let's dig into the new podcast launching this Saturday, April 17th on the YFP podcast channel. Nate, what's the mission and the why of the show?
Yeah, the mission is actually pretty simple. It's to empower pharmacists to leverage real estate as part of their financial plan. We realize that not everyone's listening to this podcast trying to take over a real estate empire, right? And really, when David and I sat down and started thinking about, what kind of philosophy are we going to have behind the show and what kind of guests are we going to have on the show and all that, we really sat back and said, well, we don't need to replicate what's already out there, right? There are some fantastic resources in the real estate space, Bigger Pockets being kind of the most obvious one, with excellent podcasts and books and all these things that I think really promote the idea of real estate investing. But what we felt like was missing was this idea of how do you couple a really fulfilling career, i.e. pharmacy, and real estate investing? How do you do both? And so our whole idea with this show is that we're going to show you how to not just leave pharmacy, but stay in pharmacy while also investing in real estate. And so that's really the overarching philosophy behind this program and the show.
Great stuff. And I think to reiterate that really is going to be the focus of the content and the audience that we want to reach. So, not to say some folks may get started and eventually build that empire, Nate, that you talked about, but knowing the vast majority of pharmacists that are listening have either not gotten started yet, but have the interest peaked, wanting to learn more, or maybe have taken a step or two, might be saving for that first property, might have bought a property or two, but really looking to take it further from there. And that's going to be the focus of this show. So David, with that in mind, what can our listeners expect? The kind of guests, the topics that we're going to be covering, as they listen to this podcast that we'll be launching each and every Saturday?
Yeah, I think the obvious one is we don't really intend on focusing on pharmacists that have left their career in pharmacy. That's not really our focus. Again, we're focused on pharmacists that want to have real estate as a part of their financial plan. So there's a lot of other better resources out there for those kind of things. But for those that are looking for tangible and practical tips on getting started, on growing, on getting better at what you're doing, that's where we're focused. Like we've got guests that are on talking about short and long-term rentals, talking about house flipping, talking about rehabbing, property management, taxes, lending, all those different things that go into buying your first or your second or your fifth property. And so focusing again on ways that you can jump into that and make that even better.
Yeah. And our goal is, David, I think one of the things we've discussed thus far is that real estate investing can look like a lot of different things. And we're going to obviously highlight a lot of different stories that will emphasize that. And it's probably going to take a lot of guests and a lot of episodes to even fully uncover the variety of options that are out there. And so we're not suggesting that there is a one right path to real estate investing. What we want to do is explore many different areas, feature many different stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, make sure we're representing all sides of that, and then really give folks an opportunity to go learn more and say, oh, that's interesting. I think that might fit or might not fit for my personal situation as they evaluate where real estate investing does or does not fit in the context of their financial plan. So Nate, if someone has a question about real estate investing that they would like to be answered, or perhaps they have a story that they want to have featured on the show, where can they go?
Yeah. And so as this podcast drops, we're going to also be launching a new website just to help out with that. And so yfprealestate.com will be your go-to source for getting in touch with us, asking questions. You can apply to be a guest on the show, all sorts of stuff. So, as this podcast launches and you guys start listening here, you can head over to yfprealestate.com. And then we also have, we've already launched, and it's been running for about a week now. And that's your Financial Pharmacist Real Estate Investing Facebook group. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for a community, looking for a place to connect with others, we've already seen some great photos posted and people talking about their investments already on there. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Facebook group, Nate. One of the goals we had with that group and with this effort overall is to connect other pharmacist investors with one another. And we had a question last week in the group that was in essence like, hey, where are you from? Welcome to the group. Where are you from? Tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to get out of this group. Tell us a little bit about your investing, what you've been working on. And to see pharmacists, hey, I'm from Buffalo, New York. I'm from Columbus. I'm from this part of the country. I think we're going to see a lot of that connection start to happen organically. So I hope folks listening will join us in that Facebook group as well, which we'll link to in the show notes. David, I want to come back to the concept that, we don't feel like real estate investing is something that folks have to choose. It's either that or it's my pharmacy career. We really feel like folks can be successful in their pharmacy career, still be passionate about what they're doing and what they've spent a lot of time and money to train to do, and still pursue and potentially reap some of the benefits that come from real estate investing. So David, tell us, how can one enjoy their profession while also investing in real estate?
Yeah, I think it's the same kind of answer that you think about when it's how do you get 700 prescriptions and 50 flu shots done in a Monday in a drugstore? It's you have a team around you that helps you, right? Like this isn't an individual sport with real estate. Like I know that I am not a realtor, I am not a contractor, I'm not a property manager, I'm not a lot of those things, but I can find people who are really good at each of those areas. And so by bringing that team together and by having some direction and leading that team, I can really step back from the day-to-day side of it and let other people that are really good at what they do what they are good at. And to me, I think that's how a lot of pharmacists can find real estate investing as a part of their financial plan without it taking over or taking too much time.
And one of the things that I know I've heard both of you talk about and seen you role model as well is that the value that a team can bring to the process and really thinking about how to begin to build your real estate portfolio with both the team and the system in mind. And I think that's really critical. I suspect many folks listening are not only busy in their full-time career as a pharmacist, but they perhaps have family, other commitments, other priorities, other things that they need to be doing, want to be working on, things that they enjoy. And so we need to be able to do this if we're going to do it in a way that is realistic with those other responsibilities and those other roles that one has. So Nate and David, you created a really valuable guide, the Pharmacist Guide to Real Estate Investing. that details essentially a step-by-step plan on just that, how to get started in real estate investing. And we're going to link to this in the show notes. And I'd like to walk through this for a few moments to give our listeners a taste of, I think, some of the information and the content that they're going to get on the show. But that guide, the Pharmacist Guide to Real Estate Investing, you can download that guide for free by visiting yfprealestate.com, or you can text REI Guide, all one word, again, REI Guide to 44222, and you can download a copy of the guide that way as well. So step number one of this guide is get your financial plan together. So topic obviously near and dear to my heart. And Nate, tell us about why this step, getting your financial plan together, is really such an important first step.
Yeah, I think a lot of this comes back to the original mission of your financial pharmacist as a whole. I think back to Tim when we had our very first meeting years and years ago, and I said, I want to be the real estate side of what you're trying to create here. And again, it all stemmed from that idea of you got to have a good financial house first before you can move on and do anything else. And again, as I approached my own real estate investing, we really stepped back and did a lot more time with the education side and the reading side, because if you don't have that financial base, that strong financial base, it becomes very, very difficult to escalate or to be successful in the real estate investing side. So we put that first because, again, it's really the core philosophy of YFP, but it's also just absolutely essential if you want to be truly successful, I think, in the real estate investing side.
Yeah, and one of the things, Nate, I think you mentioned this in the guide that I like is if you think about real estate investing being similar to pharmacy school, personal finance is like your prereqs, right? Your basic science courses. So before we build upon that, before we get into our therapeutic courses, other more advanced content, we better be sure we've got a really good foundation, or we're going to end up in trouble when we get on rotations and we have that preceptor that exposes, the lack of that information. So that's step number one, get your financial plan together. Step number two is time to study up. So I love that you guys write that first you need to learn the basics and then can decide what real estate investing niche fits your skill set. So David, talk to us about how to approach learning about real estate investing and what resources you have leaned on as you got started in your own journey.
Yeah, I think just like you wouldn't recommend a drug therapy without having any therapeutics courses, you need to have that time to study up. And with that, setting aside that time is probably the most important thing for the life of a busy pharmacist. And so for me, I found that during my daily commute, it was really easy to plug in podcasts and audiobooks. And so we will, as a part of the show, we have some outro questions where each guest recommends some resources. And so I would encourage you to take notes as we get through there. And we always put those things in the show notes as well. If you're looking for good books and resources that got each guest started, we'll have those going as well. So we'll have several recommendations coming over the next few weeks. Another thing I think are groups, whether that's in-person meetups at some point, we can hopefully be doing that again. And then also just gathering with other friends and people that can bring accountability and education and you can share in that with. So carving out that time, I think, is really important. But I also think that there's even in the life of a busy pharmacist, you can find 15 minutes here and there to get through an audiobook or podcast slowly.
Yeah, and David, I'm envisioning a future state, post-COVID perhaps, where we have a real estate meetup of pharmacists at a state or national meeting or other venues, which is really exciting to think about. What is your over-under, David, on the number of times we're going to hear guests recommend Rich Dad Poor Dad in the first 50 episodes?
48 out of 50, yes. I think is what I'm thinking. Yeah.
We're going to have to strict that from the options. You can't pick that as your favorite. I'm sorry.
So step number 3, location is everything. Nate, you know this obviously as an agent. So choosing where you're going to invest in real estate is such an important step. Nate, give us a broad overview of some factors to consider whether somebody is choosing a location for their first or perhaps their 5th real estate property.
Yeah, absolutely. So really it comes down to assessing those locations. I think as we look at investors when they're either starting out or they're looking at a new market, figuring out where to invest is one of those big steps in terms of, okay, well, is it going to be something that I need to have close by? Do I have someone there that's part of my team that I can tap into? Do I know anyone there already? And then it gets into the actual, macroeconomic factors of that location. So is the city seeing population growth, job market, is that diversified? What's the rent to income ratio look like? All those things that get factored into it. And so there are you can be successful anywhere at any time. Anybody that tells you, oh, you can't invest there, the market doesn't work. It works for something, but what you have to find is a way to pair that that location with your strategy and your goals.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think figuring that out together can be difficult. And so we really try to address that in the guide about here are some factors to consider before you start moving forward.
And step number 4 then is choosing a strategy. So we've got our financial house in order. We've soaked up lots of real estate investing knowledge. We've decided on a location. And David, what comes next when one evaluates the strategies available?
Yeah, I think that as you're figuring out that strategy, that's just really important because you think through each potential real estate acquisition through the lens of that strategy in order to make sure that it's effective.
Mm-hmm.
Like you may find this beautiful lakefront property, and if you run the numbers as a long-term buy and hold where someone would move in there and live there for years, it may not work nearly as well as if it was a Airbnb or VRBO kind of vacation rental. The numbers may work much better that way. So figuring out your strategy and the way that you want to invest in real estate can really help you figure out which property is the right acquisition for that plan.
Yeah, and we've talked about a few. I know you mentioned a couple earlier in the show, but we've had on guests talking about house hacking. We've had Nate on to talk about flipping. We've talked about long distance real estate investing. We've talked about using the BRRRR strategy. So we're going to dig into these and others as pharmacists again evaluate, okay, what's out there? And then as I learn more, which of those may fit into my financial plan. So step number 5, build your team. Nate, we talked about this briefly already, but team is so important when we think about real estate investing, not only in the long-term success, but also being able to make the most of our time and the limited time that we have. So talk to us about this concept of building a team and who we should be thinking about being included on this team.
Yeah, and this applies whether you're investing locally, down the street, or whether you're investing across the country. There are just certain members that you're going to need to build into that. And we try to, one, demystify that process, but also make it feel easy. I know every time I heard, you have to build a team to be successful in real estate, it just sounded kind of overwhelming. Like, I don't know how to build a team. I don't know how to do any of that. So we try to break that down and make it a little bit easier. But the idea is that you need to have that real estate agent. You need to have, potentially a lawyer, an accountant, a financial planner. There are all these different members that can help you out. And so how do you tap into the good ones? And how do you get to that team more quickly? So the guide helps with that a little bit. And then it also alludes to our expansion of the real estate concierge service, which we've been doing on the home buying side for years. But really this new model is looking at how do we connect you guys with investor-friendly agents? Yeah. So again, head on over to yfprealestate.com. We have access to our real estate concierge service where we can get you connected with a local investor-friendly real estate agent, somebody that can actually help elevate that business wherever you're trying to invest.
Very important distinction between agents that specialize on the primary residence home buying side and those that are familiar with the investing side, and ideally maybe even have some experience themselves or have worked with many clients that have gone through that path and know what they may be looking at to be able to advise them. Step number 6, David, the math. So we gotta actually figure out, is this a good deal or not? And so step number 6 is double or triple check the math. So talk to us about the importance of running the numbers. And obviously something we'll dig into in much more detail as we go throughout the show and have individual cases and scenarios. But, how is the math run? Why is it so important? Talk to us about this step.
Yeah, I think we're all familiar in the pharmacy space that if you do the math wrong, that can be life and death for a patient. And I think the parallel with real estate is if you do the math wrong with real estate, it's life or death of that deal, right? It can be a really, really bad experience if you do the math wrong. If you do the math right, you check it well, and that ends up being a great investment for you, then that's also a huge win. So there's some strategy in doing those numbers correctly. There's some online calculators, and YFP has one. I'm sure we'll put the link in the show notes today, but those online calculators are just like in the profession of pharmacy, where there's different online calculators for things that we need as well. So just getting familiar with those numbers to the point where it becomes really understandable and simple of how to evaluate those deals makes it just that much easier to find something that you're comfortable with, to break through that analysis paralysis and to jump in.
And we will link to the YFP rental property calculator that David was alluding to. We'll link to that in the show notes. And finally, Nate, step number 7 is we're ready to make an offer. So talk to us about really 2 key points to keep in mind as folks are getting ready to make an offer.
Yeah, I think when you get to this point where you've done all this background work and you've gotten to this point where, okay, I think this is a deal, we're going to go put this offer in. There's 2 really important things to keep in mind, and that is that you need to keep emotion out of it. that this is an investment. This is not your forever home. And so once you've done all that math, like David said, don't ruin it by ignoring the math and making a bad decision. So keep the emotion out of it, walk into that deal with here's where we're going to go from a number standpoint, and we're not going to vary from that. And then realize that not every good house is going to work out, right? Even if everything looks great, if you can't get to that, right negotiating spot, it's worth it to walk away. And so I think, again, step 7 really should be do what you did steps 1 through 6 and make sure you stick to it, because that's really what the offer is all about, is that you've done all this background work. Just stay in line with what you've decided ahead of time.
Great stuff. So we've just scratched the surface on these 7 steps that are part of the Pharmacist Guide to Real Estate Investing, which you can download at yfprealestate.com, or you also can text REI Guide, again, all one word, REI Guide, to 44222 to get a copy. So I hope that you will join us for episode 1 of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast that's going to launch this Saturday, April 17th, where Nate and David talk with Tim Baker and I about how real estate investing may fit into a pharmacist's financial plan. We also talk about considerations for how long someone should be in their personal finance journey, where you should be perhaps with debt repayment, where you should be perhaps with your investing plan before jumping into real estate investing. And then we also talk about how one may balance real estate investing with a busy pharmacy career. So you can listen again to the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast right here on the YFP Podcast channel. It's going to launch each and every Saturday. What better way to start the weekend than learning about real estate investing, hearing from other pharmacists that are along this journey as well. So David and Nate, thank you both, not only for your time on this episode, but I know firsthand the time and effort that goes into putting a podcast together. It's both exciting and exhausting at times. There's moments of re-records. There's moments of that was an episode that went great, but really an awesome opportunity as well to meet other pharmacists and connect with folks all across the country. So I appreciate your passion for this topic, your willingness to teach others, and the time commitment that you've made in being able to put this podcast together.
Yeah, we appreciate you letting us do it. This is, really been, like you said, months and months in the making, and it's really fun to get to this point. And David and I have been having a really good time interviewing the initial guests we've been working with, and I can't wait to see where we go from here.
Yeah, we've got some really inspiring people coming on in the first few shows, and so I'm really excited about it and looking forward to it kicking off officially on Saturday.
Great stuff. So again, this Saturday, April 17th, I hope you'll join us for episode 1. And as always, we appreciate you joining us on this week's episode of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. Have a great rest of your week.